Yes. Okay. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this session organized by IEEE CAS Bangalore chapter on IEEE paper review best practices. So, this talk will provide an overview of what are the very good practices in reviewing a particular IEEE conference paper and what are the things to keep in mind for the same. Let me introduce the speakers. We are going to have Oyon Datta, who has 13 plus years of experience in digital circuit design, physical design, and timing convergence. He has been recognized consistently for performance excellence and contributions to success in the VLSI industry. He is an enthusiastic thought leader driving innovation across design and optimization in digital circuit design with over 6 US patents and 7 publications in leading IEEE conferences and journals. He is also an acknowledged mentor and leader with a proven track record of building budding design engineers to become more independent and move to the next level in the technical ladder. So thanks a lot, Oyon, for being here for presenting the session. And we also have Dr. Rahul M. Rao. He is a distinguished engineer at the Enterprise Server Development Team at IBM India. He was the chip circuit and power lead for IBM's enterprise class Power 10 processor. Rahul received his PhD from University of Michigan in 2004, worked on high performance circuit design at IBM Research till 2012, and since then he has led the physical design team at IBM Bangalore. Rahul is also an adjunct faculty at IIT Madras. Thanks a lot, Rahul, for agreeing to do this session. So, okay, now we can start the session. Over to you, Oyon and Rahul. We can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Shobana. So good afternoon, everyone. This is Ayan, and as Shobana was mentioning, we would like to go over the best known practices for IEEE paper review. Just give me a minute. I'll just get the presentation started. Okay. So first of all, I think warm welcome to this session. So this session will be mostly talking about, what are the things we can keep in mind while we are reviewing a paper and some of the experience that we had while we were reviewing the papers and also while we were working as session chairs in some of the and track chairs for some of the conferences and also as a reviewer in journals. So along with me, Rahul and I would be, engaging with you. It will be a presentation mostly very informal. We would like to give an overview and we can take questions in between. But at the same time, we will have to keep a time check so that we complete the content. So feel free to, type your questions whenever you have. And I'm pretty sure Strobana can take it up in the middle and ask those questions. Okay,
Yes.
so we are, we all are from the IEEE Circuits and Systems Society, and I'm leading the chapter this year for Bangalore, and Rahul is the vice chair for technical activity, and Strobana is a joint secretary, and along with that, a lot of other responsibilities she's holding for the YCAS as well. So, so to start the presentation, we would also like to take you over some of the some stuff about IEEE so that you kind of get an idea about what IEEE is, and then we can definitely maybe after 5-7 minutes we can get into the review part of it so that it gives a better context to the overall presentation. So this will be the overall presentation today. We'll start with a rough introduction about the the role of IEEE and its societies, and we will also talk about a role of a reviewer in this given context. We'll also talk about what are the different, expected content of an IEEE paper, what are the different sections and things like that. Then we'll also, walk you over what are the different expectation of reviewer from every section. We need to keep in mind that what are the content of the paper and what from every section, what we need to expect from the author and how do we review that. And then we'll try to conclude towards the end by taking some of the live reviews of some of the papers submitted in different conferences, and we will analyze that. So me and Rahul will be engaging on these lines. So with that, let me get started with what IEEE is. I think many of you are already aware that IEEE is one of the biggest professional network with more than 4 lakh members. we call it our professional home, and you can call yourself as well, because even wherever you are, in whichever company you are in, whichever institution you are in, this is your professional home where you can always walk back and connect with people, right? It's an extended family that you have, and we call it our professional home. It's the largest professional association advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. The IEEE is it's more of a it's basically a bigger umbrella, and under that you have a lot of pillars which kind of supports this a bigger institution, and these pillars are its technical societies, right? And there are 39 technical societies which are focusing on each and every area of research. So you can think of it in this way that when you walk in a university, you have separate building for each and every department. So the same way you can think of as IEEE as a bigger institution, and in that you have a separate department for each and every area of research. And circuits and systems is one of those societies which kinds of is part of these 39 technical societies. Moving on. IEEE Circuits and Systems, you can visit the website, but it's roughly around 9K members globally. This is a society which is mostly having members, one of the societies which have members from working in or pursuing their studies in VLSI domain. There are other societies which also overlaps, like you have EDS, you have SSCS, which are also professionals from VLSI, but Circuits and Systems is one of them where VLSI pursuing professionals or working professionals are part of circuits and systems. Some of the leading conferences, I mean, you are aware that each and every society have their own flagship conferences, and circuits and system has some of their very well-known flagship conferences, which are ISCAS, APCAS, AICAS, and ICCAT. These are some of them which are very well known, and I'm pretty sure some of you might have already submitted your paper or already traveled to attend these conferences. So globally, the CAS is roughly around 9K members. This is present across the globe, and the topmost. The way it works is the CAS has its own sub modules, or you can call it local presence across the globe and they call it chapter. And Bangalore chapter is one of it. So the work which is done locally, or you can call it to develop the local ecosystems in the area of circuits and systems. CAS, has their own chapter or the presence, a local ecosystem is built around that, right? So we have multiple chapters, and among them, the leading one is from Seoul and Santa Clara, with leading around 500 to 590, close to 600 members, and Santa Clara with 500 members. We are not behind. We are close to 322 members now, and with the presence of at Bangalore section level across all the societies, we have presence of roughly around 10K members, I think. So this is where we are positioned, and I would just wanted to mention that this has a lot bigger impact, because Bangalore is a place where we all know and a lot of work and research happening in the area of VLSI and embedded system. So circuits and system is one of the relevant societies which is definitely expanding pretty significantly in the last few years. So some of the key focus areas which we wanted to highlight about the 4 pillars which we are focusing, we are talking about technology. So we have a tech group, which is not the technical committee, which is headed by Rahul. So we bring in the latest and greatest. Sorry, can you people be on mute? There is some background noise. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so there are technical talks which are planned every month, which are focusing on the latest and greatest state-of-the-art technologies which are available, and which includes multi-die integration, and we are talking about quantum. We are talking about some of the lectures which are also on SOI technologies and things like that, right? So this is one tower which the goal is to bring in the latest and greatest technology to the people. We also focus on skill development, because this is one of the focus area for IEEE as well as Government of India, where we work with the students and faculties, and also people in the early part of their career in industry. So we hold a lot of workshops, and there are industry academia meets which are conducted to help ensure that industry and academia work together and transfer the knowledge of research and the state of the art technologies which are available in the industry. And we have a flagship event called I2I, which is mostly focusing on prepping up the students of final year to get them industry ready, right? So which is happening this Saturday. So these are some of the focus on skill development. Industry academia, as I mentioned, right, there is a lot of focus. We have industry forum, we have we are having startup forums and ISA IIC, which are planned, which is Industry Academia Conclave, which is working on. And finally, the diversity and inclusion is one of the piece which is, which is pretty important for the CAS Bangalore chapter. And in YCAS we call it Women in Circuits and System. In short, we call YCAS. We have tons of event which is lined up. We call it Win Tech On. We call, which is coming up as a bigger, one of the flagship conference of CAS Society in Bangalore. And most of you who are attending today's session are also part of that and part of, reviewing the papers submitted for that conference. We have WinTech Talk, which is a bi-monthly, I would say, a once in 2 months, let's call it in this way, where we have tech talks coming given by women technology leaders coming and presenting the technical talks about, of their area of expertise. We have scholarship, and we also scholarships in the pipeline, which will be offered very soon, in discussion. And these are some of the plans of Win Lead. That means we want women in leadership roles. So we have some programs and awards which are also in plan to be given to the women in leadership roles. So this is some of the focus areas. I would say there are a lot more, but I encourage all of you to visit the website of IEEE CAS Bangalore, which has a lot more details to go over it. But just wanted to give an overview. One of the key thing which I wanted to highlight as well, because most of you are from industry and have pretty good experience, I encourage all of you to look at IEEE senior membership. So this is something which is a grade elevation program. So IEEE looks at the package which you submit and looks at their technical contribution, your experience, and it is through a process of nomination. It's not that you can get a membership by paying a fee for senior membership. So you can become an IEEE member, and then you have to apply for senior membership. And once your application is reviewed and people see a significant contribution in the area of technical areas, and you have significant professional experience, then it is counted or taken for review, and people, it's the results are announced. So recently we had 16 senior members who got promoted in IEEE CAS. So I would like you to look at this and consider, because this is one of the things which really helps you move pretty fast in your ladder, in your career ladder. And it gets you can easily get a platform to get recognized, and it opens up a door for multiple things where you now become a recognized leader from IEEE as well. And you can be part of multiple panels, you can be part of reviewers, track chairs, many of the IP committees, sorry, the standard committees can be will be reaching out to you to participate. So this, it opens up a big opens up a big door towards your technical career path. So please take a look at it, and if you're interested, please reach out to any one of us and write to us. We can definitely take it forward. So this is about senior membership. This is the basic requirement of senior membership, that you need to have total 10 years of experience, and you get a discount for your degree courses. So if you're a bachelor, you get 3 years of 3 years of discount. That means you just need to have 7 years of experience. If you're a master degree holder, then you need 6 years of experience. And if you are a PhD, then you need to have 5 years of experience to apply for senior membership, right? So this is what it is. You can get more details about it once you visit the website. So this is all what we wanted to highlight, so that you can have some idea about IEEE and IEEE circuits and systems. And if you think that this could be your professional home, then it may be a time to take that step forward and take the membership and connect with us and be part of this bigger network. Okay, so with that, let us move on. I think it's time for us to look at the chapter. I mean, this is the latest launch website. You can visit this www.cas.ieeebangalore.org. Okay, so let me start with a very a cartoon which I recently got when I was looking at some preparing the content for this session. And many of us were authors, and are still authors. We are submitting papers into multiple conference, and this is our view, right? When we submit a paper, right? It's people standing on our way with all those instruments, and you can think of people really thrashing you and telling that hey, you have done a very bad job, and your paper is not accepted. And if it is really accepted, then you have fairly done a great job. You have to cross a lot more hurdles to reach there. So this is what we felt when we used to submit paper. At least some of the reviews were very tough to understand, very harsh as well, right? So it's not easy, but yeah, this is the reality, right? And we are here to talk about that, how we can change this author's view, so that it doesn't look like this. We don't see these these weapons in the hand, but rather we see them as a hand taken forward to pull to bring the author on board and take him all the way through this journey and help him move to this destination of paper accepted, right? So this is what we're going to talk about today, and that is why I say that it's very important for author to understand what hat they are wearing, right? So let us understand. I think we all by now we understood that what IEEE is, right? We have around 4 lakh members, 400,000 members, and with that, the technical content, or I would say the standard of the technical content is pretty high. You can understand that the cutting edge technology research, the patents, sorry, the standards definition. So, and you will also see people coming in multiple leading conferences talking about the future technologies and things like that. So we definitely cannot lose our guards, telling that, hey, we can allow papers which may be okay to be in this conference, right? Because we are the guardians, right? We are protecting what IEEE is known for. We are protecting the brand. We are also talking about what standard it maintains, right? So as a reviewer, right, we need to be the guardian of it, right? We need to make sure that, so this is one of the hat which we always have to wear, that the quality is the most important thing. We cannot compromise on that. But while keeping that in mind, we also have to wear another hat, which is a mentor's hat, right? And if the reason I'm highlighting this is, if we are just a guardian, then the reviewer is just looking at, hey, am I taking the right decision in bringing the paper in IEEE ecosystem, or you can call it in the Explore or all the journals or conference. But there's other part to it, that am I helping the author to take this paper to publish, maybe not in this conference but in the next conference, right? So there are two parts to it, right? It's not that we only focus on, hey, this is a good paper, let me focus, write good things, and hey, this is a bad paper, let me just thrash, hey, you just wasted my time, and it is a rubbish thing if you have posted, you guys, need to work hard and get back, but you don't give constructive feedback, or we don't give a constructive feedback, then we are stopping the journey of that innovator or an author to move to the next step. So these are the two hats which we always have to wear when we are reviewing a paper, and it is extremely important to strike a very good balance between them. Right. So let's look at it, when we say striking the right balance, right? So I'll just take some examples which we might have come across while we have submitted a paper. So we might have seen some of these paper reviewer comments, right? On the left hand side, I've highlighted being a guardian, right? How a reviewer would have commented. Again, these are hypothetical cases. In some cases, you might have seen review comments similar to this, but not taken from any of the reviews. So let's take some of the hypothetical cases here, that paper doesn't have any innovation. This is one liner given by the reviewer, for example, and he is rejecting the paper. Whereas on the other side, author wearing both the guardian and mentor hat is writing that, author fails to highlight the innovation. Author needs to highlight that how the innovation is coming out through this idea which is proposing. So this is the difference you bring in, that you are not only a guardian, right? You are definitely a guardian to make sure the quality and is at par with what IEEE expects. But at the same time, you are giving constructive feedback to the author that, your paper may not be reaching to that level, but what are the reasons and how they can work on it and get back with a better paper next time. I have seen some of the comments like this: one liner, paper not written well, paper rejected. This is something which we may want to avoid as well. Why? Because if we just write this, it doesn't really tell the organizing committee or the TPC that what really went wrong, right? And what could have been improved, right? So these are important points to keep in mind, that yes, you might have felt that it's not written well, it's not worthy of going for the publication, but at the same time you need to again provide constructive feedback, and the alternative way would be that paper can be improved by improving specific sections and highlighting the areas where the paper is not written well. Third, results doesn't make sense, or it could be that result doesn't really has a lot of value in the context of the paper. So the other way of putting it could be that results presented are not supporting the aim and objective, and which the author may want to achieve, and what are the results to which he or she needs to add in the paper, so that the aim and the objective of the paper can be can be achieved, right, through that, or can be supported with that. So these are some things which I wanted to highlight, that yes, we are guardian, but at the same time, we don't need to be harsh. We don't need to be, strict on telling conveying what is there, but we can also be strict, but at the same time, we give constructive feedback, which is very, very important for while we are reviewing a paper. And the last one, I'm highlighting that when I'm a mentor, I'm emotional. I'm thinking that, hey, this paper, yeah, it's not that well. Maybe it's in the borderline, which is like paper is written well, but it is not something where we are only wearing the mentor's hat and we say that, okay, paper is written well, the content is okay to accept, but then we have to take a decision. We have to put our guardian's hat and saying that, hey, are we making a justice if we allow this paper to go into IEEE Explore? Then is it going to make a difference, or is it at par with all the other papers which are sitting there, right? So again, give constructive feedback. If they are borderline cases, you may have to take your calls, but again, do not allow any papers just because they are written well but the technical content is not that great, right? So these are some of the, I would say, hypothetical cases to help you understand that how the striking the right balance between a guardian and a mentor is very, very important as we are reviewing the papers. So keeping this in mind, I just thought to walk you over that what are the content and the expected in an IEEE paper while you're reviewing it, so that when you're reviewing it, you have the clarity that, is this paper written to the standard which is expected by IEEE. So many of you are aware that IEEE has given templates on which you need to align to. So I'm not going into that, but this is the first and foremost thing which TPC checks, that whether it is in 2 column, whether it is following the format, the font sizes, many things are there, right? So I think I'm not going to that. I believe you guys are aware, you all are aware, and if not, you can go over the guidelines and the templates of IEEE. But here, what we are going to talk about is when somebody is presenting a research paper, right? What they generally keep in mind and how they should present their research work, right? So these are the sections which are expected. We need an abstract, an introduction, a problem formulation, or we should call it as aim and objective of the research. Then what is the proposed solution or the idea which the person is proposing? What is the experimental setup which is used to validate their ideas with results and definitely support the research work with the results and conclusion, right? These are the some of the area. These are the basic requirement, I would say, for a given IEEE paper to be reviewed. If some of these are missing, then definitely a feedback should go to the author that, these are the sections which are missing and you need to add that as well. So quickly going over the brief introduction about what abstracts are. So I think you all are aware that it's a brief introduction. It summarizes the paper. Most importantly, it highlights the aim and objective of the research, right? Right, what the person has carried out. And at the end of the abstract, we also would like to hear that, what are the accomplishments based on the results, which the author will be presenting in the later half of the paper. So it's a brief summary. If I want to understand what this paper is all about, I would be able to get an idea and also understand that what the paper has achieved towards the end, right? So at least that idea, key accomplishments will be highlighted in the abstract section. Coming to the introduction part, right, which is very, very important, right? So any reviewer who is reviewing the paper, it is, or a author who is presenting the paper, anybody else reading it should understand that what this research work is all about, right? So introduction is one of the key portion which kind of highlights that or gives the background of the research area. So for example, if somebody is working on an area X, that area needs to be highlighted with enough references, right? Okay, if I want to learn more about that topic, I can go and refer to the reference and find out the references in the bibliography and then read on my own before I come to this paper as well, right? Because it is not possible for you to fit in everything in 6 pages, right? So or 4 pages in some cases, right? So you may have to mention a statement that this is what is mentioned here, and you can read more, putting a reference there. So this is a expected, format of an IEEE paper, wherein in the introduction you kind of refer multiple other research papers, so that people know that where we are, right, and what is this topic about. The second portion of the introduction is extremely important, which the author wants to present the literature survey. So when I'm a reviewer or when I'm a reader of the paper after the paper is accepted, I need to know that before I understand what research is presented here, I need to know what has happened in this area, right? So the prior art survey or literature survey is extremely important. And the portion in introduction should talk about it, should discuss about it, that what is the literature survey that the author has done, and he or she needs to highlight that, what are the key which were the key papers which we need to refer to, go read, and then build on it, right? So at the end of the day, it's the paper is a story, right? A research story, and the author needs to present it in this way. And introduction is where the story starts, right? The base of the story starts. So it's a very important for the author to highlight the literature survey. And finally, towards the end of the introduction, it is expected the author explains about what a reader should expect in the coming sections. So for example, he or she should highlight that, the next section is having this, and then we'll talk about the results and then conclude with the conclusion, so that you get a fair idea that what to expect in the coming sections. The next most important thing is the problem formulation, right? So it is very, very important that author highlights that what problem he's trying to solve, right? He or she's trying to solve, because you know before you propose your solution, you have set the background where you're which area you're trying to solve the problem through introduction, and you have given a prior art. But now it is time for you to tell that, this is where I am going to solve the problem. So this is the problem statement, and these are my aims and objective of my research, which I kind of want to achieve towards the end of when I will talk about the conclusion and the result. I'll try to achieve this aim and accomplish this objective which is there. So you need to, as a reviewer, we need to make sure that this section is very, very clear, and we need to make sure that what problem the user wants to solve is very clear to us. If there are ambiguities there, then you might see that results are, you have to tally this with the results. I mean, the problem statement and the problem formulation should be supported with the results, that hey, is it this really solving the problem which the author wants to really solve? These are the things as a reviewer you need to check. So understanding the problem formulation is very, very important. Section is very, very important. And as a reviewer, you need to keep in mind that the aims, objective, and the problem statement is very clear to us. The next section where author spends moves us to is the proposed solution, right? So the author presents the innovative solution which you have got to the problem statement, right? So one of the key thing, which first thing as a reviewer you have to keep in mind, that uh, whenever I am an innovator, right, I would always love my idea, right? So I would think that this is the best idea and this is the known idea which I know, and there is no other ideas which are in the similar range, in the similar I would say are similar to what is talked about in this paper. But as a reviewer, we need to go out, we need to check the prior art and make sure that what idea is presented, this is really innovative, or this is maybe something which is already presented earlier, and user is just taking it and presenting it in another form, right? So it's very, very important that where the differentiating part is, where the idea is different from what is already presented. So as a reviewer, again, as a guardian, you have to put your hat and say that, hey, is it something which is really innovative, or it's something an extension of an idea, which is also okay? An extension of idea is also okay, but is it the same idea which is already presented in some other paper in IEEE or any other publications which has happened till now, right? So this is number one. Number two, it's very, very important that the solution which is proposed by the author, is this the solution to the proposed problem statement, right? In many cases, author failed to explain that how the solution will help in solving the problem statement which he has made in the previous section, right? So it is extremely important as a reviewer to look at it that, hey, the solution proposed by user, is it really solving the problem which he or she has proposed? If it is not, then definitely the feedback should go to the author that, the problem solution is different from what you're trying to achieve through your aim and objective. So make sure that it is in line and how you can achieve it, right? This is something to keep in mind as a reviewer, right? And then it should also talk about the author should talk about the solution, how he's implementing it through flow diagrams and algorithms, and explaining it through the proper proper diagrams and figures. And as a reviewer, it is extremely important to keep in mind that you need to ensure that all those figures are clear, because you are the person who are approving that, okay, this content is readable, this is content can be absorbed by people who will be reading later, right? So from IEEE journals or from Explore site, we download papers and we read. Now it is extremely important that readability is good, right? So I'm just highlighting the point that in many cases the figures and tables and charts are not clear. Maybe people just took a snapshot, put it there. Because of that, it is not clear. So it's very important that they are clearly and readable, right? It is very important. Number one. Number two, if you are approving that this proposed solution is really good and it is in line, so it is important that we get a context, right? That, okay, this is again in the flow of the story, right? That we started with introduction and then we try to explain that why this problem is need to be solved, what is the problem and why it needs to be solved, and then we gave a solution which is in line with it. So the story continues, and that continuity needs to be there. In some cases, we have seen that author discreetly gives a solution, fails to you know uh, bead put the bead in the garland, right? So it is very hard to really get the context and sudden switch. So in those cases, the feedback should go to the author, that how he can really build upon it and help in getting a continuity for the readers, that from the previous section to the next section, they can understand that this proposed solution is helping to solve the problem which was stated. Finally, the most important part, the results, right? We all know that we may have, we all are, while reviewing the paper, if whatever we want to achieve, we need to support that with results. We cannot just say, I have a great idea and this really would work, but this would work doesn't work in case of publications, right? So that is why the author needs to support the idea with enough data, right? So before we go into the actual result, two things author needs to keep in mind while reviewing the paper is: one, what was the experimental setup which was used? The reason I'm highlighting this is, in many of the paper, user or the author needs to compare with previous methods, known methods, and he or she needs to replicate the previous experiment to compare against, right? So, and they need to know what was the CPUs in which it was run, or maybe what kind of machines was used, and many other things, right? So the experimental setup is extremely important, so that the next researcher can replicate the setup and try to rebuild on it and try to compare their new method from that there on, right? So it's very important. Second, the sample data set, right? This is where the experience comes in, where you need to take your call that the sample data set which is shown as a result, is this a good candidate to consider or conclude that this particular, the claims which are made by the author, that this idea is good and these are the results. So the sample data set should support the facts and the figures, right? If you think that then the sample data set is not enough, maybe author needs to consider and expand the sample data set to consider few more data points which will be covering the sample data set even better. Then feel free to provide that feedback as well. So the feedback is not just about the result, it is definitely about the experimental setup and also on the sample data set which the author is talking about. Finally, as again, results and charts needs to be readable, very, very important. And the results are analyzed well, right? Extremely important that the analysis of the results are done in line with the aims and objective, right? It should not be that I here 10% improvement, here there 5% degradation, and the result section ends. How this is really, putting in the context of the aim and objective of this research, the author needs to present it in a way that, this 10% signifies that, the aim which was there for us to at the beginning of the paper, right? We wanted to achieve this. This shows that this is achieved, right? So this is in the expected lines that, what an author should be writing, rather than just discreetly mentioning about here 10% improved, there 5% degraded. Again, the story needs to be put in place, that how the results are tying up to the aims and objective. Otherwise, it doesn't really help to the readers and as well as to the reviewers. Finally, the most important part, which as a reviewer we need to put attention to, is the conclusion section, because it should finally present a summary of all the accomplishments through the research work. It should also talk about the highlights of what were the results and how they were achieved and how it helped in achieving the aims and establishing the objectives. It's very, very important, as I mentioned, that at the end, the key highlights that, results will be lot on the table or in the graphs, right? But the key things needs to be highlighted in the conclusion, which is very, very important. Finally, it is extremely important to look for some of the limitation of the research work. It cannot be that an idea is full blown properly, is fit for all, right? One size fit for all is not possible, right? There will be limitation. There will be cases where it is only for this particular things, right? So you need to look for that. Is author really explaining that what this solution is only for these kind of data sets and not for that kind? Because the reader needs to be clear that, this area of research or the idea is focusing on this area, rather than, making it generic where and not highlighting the limitations. And finally, the future scope of the research work is very, very important, because the goal is to just not approve this research, but to enable other researchers across the globe and the planet to ensure that, they take this idea as a seed and then try to build upon it, right? So the future scope should be there, then we call it as a good work. And finally, the reference section, which I haven't quoted, but a good reference section which is connecting to the story, is very, very important to ensure that the people can go and refer to the sections wherever they have questions. So this is all about the different sections of the paper, and what we need to keep in mind while we are reviewing the papers. In summary, the goal of a reviewer is to make sure that the story is complete. If you sit with this in mind, that am I reading a storybook, and starting from the beginning to end, it's a technical story and which explains it well with proper charts, figures, with proper clarity of, of the problem statements and the idea, and also talking about that, how the results are really helping me understand what were the aims and objective, and also opens up the door for research for many other researchers to pursue this field, then definitely it's a good paper. Otherwise, we would like to provide feedback on each and every specific section and let the author work on it and make it better. So with that, I'll take a pause and see if we can take few questions before we move on to the section of specific reviews. I think we are getting late. Maybe we can take it later, right, Rahul? Or
Sure, you can
yeah, so
take
let's
later. I'll
continue.
stop.
We'll take it. Yeah, we'll take it at the end, I think.
Thanks, Anne. Thanks for covering in great detail what I wanted to say. So that makes my job easier um, for everybody else, right? What I'm going to say is one person's perspective, my perspective on approaching reviews. So please take what applies to you with a pinch of salt or a bag of salt as you might find appropriate. Ayan hit this topic already as to why you're being a reviewer. You are here to safeguard the interest, the reputation of the conference, but you're also here to evaluate whether a paper would make sense for a potential paying attendee at the conference. There are some papers which may be great in terms of what they're trying to contribute, but may not gel with the audience. So you have to consider whether the paper is in sync with the goal or the theme of the conference. Most conferences have a theme year to year, it changes, but at least the main focus of the conference. So please try and look for the relevance of the paper for the track that you're evaluating in or for the conference in general as you do that. There are generally, in my view, many kinds of papers. I talked about the papers where a new novel idea is being put forward. There are other papers which are more taking a stand paper. This is the direction that we all need to go in. They're not necessarily formulating a new approach to certain things. There are other kinds of papers which are re-emphasis papers. Taking a bunch of existing ideas, 3 or 4, putting them together and showing, look, at a large scale, this actually works, which may be a demonstration paper as well. Typically, there's a bunch of industry papers which talk about, look, this idea existed. We have been able to apply this in an industrial setting, meeting all the stringent constraints that exist in an industrial platform as compared to what might exist in an academic institution where the primary goal is to do proof of concept. Whereas in industry, the goal is to make sure we can sell the product eventually. So meeting the high bar also works for this kind of approaches. There are some papers like that. There are case study papers. So when you're looking at a paper, try and categorize it in your head. What section does this fall under? Because generally the kind of review you will write would need to be modulated based on that. Some of the constraints that are some of the judging criteria may also change based on the kind of paper that exists. In some paper, there may not be a novelty, but it is a demonstration that 4 things can be put together. That's valuable. There may be certain things which say this does not work. That's valuable too, right? So think of it in terms of what the audience would like to hear and what kind of paper this is, right? While you're being a reviewer. So the second thing to think about is what kind of review would you like to receive, right? I mean, generally when I showed the image of people with arms trying to block your way, nobody wants to receive that kind of review. But theoretically, I think in my view, there are 2 things that you want to hear when you receive the review. First, the reviewer understood the key idea of the paper. So if your review is skewed towards one obsolete or one small paragraph in the paper and trashes that paragraph, where that is just a sidestep of the whole paper, the author will feel, yeah, maybe that paragraph wasn't great or that section wasn't great, but that's not the key idea. So to focus on what the key idea of the paper is and make sure that your comments are relevant to that. Second is that you understand the assumptions and context of the paper. So there's categories of paper. There are certain assumptions people make to either simplify the problem, because that's the only way it can be solved using certain other approaches which they want to apply. If the paper is trying to prove that this simplification works, right? It's a valid simplification, but you've got to question whether that simplification holds true in a broader context. And if that simplification fundamentally breaks one of the guiding principles of our scientific community. Even though the rest of the paper is wonderful, that paper may not be appropriate for the conference. In fact, it may be harmful, because subsequently people will think that is the right thing to do, and one thing builds to other. You'll get 20 papers in the next conference following the same approach, all fundamentally flawed, making the same potentially wrong assumption. So make sure you understand the paper, the key contribution of the paper, understand the assumptions and the context before you start writing your review itself. I also hit this, what can you do to make the paper better? And I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of the review writing itself. And the last point here is we've all been there. We've all written our first paper, waited nervously for the review. And the first line is this: I didn't understand the paper. This paper does not make sense. That doesn't necessarily give you a very positive vibe. You may be an author, first-time student. Please handle with care how you write the reviews. And this is not just a responsibility of the reviewer. This is also a responsibility of the track chair. Once all the reviews are collated, the track chair should really go through all the reviews and make sure there aren't any objectionable comments or insensitive comments. And if they exist, the track chair, please ping back to the reviewer and say, please modify this. This doesn't sound right. It's okay to modify your reviews post the discussion as well. And with that, if you go to the next slide. Okay. So I'll spend a couple of minutes on what I do for reviews and then illustrate a couple of reviews. Bidding process. Some conferences have this, some conferences don't. Upfront, you're given an abstract of all the papers that have been submitted and say, please vote for the papers that you're comfortable reviewing, you're maybe comfortable reviewing, you definitely don't want to review, or you have a conflict of interest. So I'll hit the conflict of interest first. The conflict of interest usually works with affiliations being identical, but it also should exist for people that you work closely with. So if you did an abstract and you think you exactly know who has written the paper, then you probably should not review the paper at all. It may be people not in your association, but an academic work where you have collaborated with, written a paper in the last 3 years with them, then please avoid reviewing those papers. People change companies, so it's not just your current company, it's the company that you've been in the last 3 years. That constitutes a conflict of interest, so please avoid those. In terms of bidding, typically ask the track chair, how many papers do you expect each reviewer to get? Don't just bid for that exact number of papers. I would ideally say bid for a little more than that, and make sure that at least 70% of your bids are something that you're comfortable reviewing with. Comfortable being a reviewer confidence score of 3 or 4. That makes the job of the track chair a little easier. Otherwise, it's really, you don't know what kind of reviews you will get, and you do want to have a mix of reviews when you eventually get the reviews. Just because you've bid for a paper in particular fashion doesn't mean you will get that paper. Likewise, if you bid no for a particular paper, doesn't mean you will not get the paper. When I am a track chair, I typically try and make sure that for any paper, there are at least 3 reviews which are moderate confidence, and there's at least one where the reviewer actually says, I may not be able to review this. It's not said an outright no, but he has said maybe. And the reason for that is the audience will consist of people who understand the paper, who understand the area, but also others who don't. And at least for those, there should be some value in the paper. So it's good to get reviews from people who are not exactly in the same area, but somewhat understand it. When the first set of paper assignments come, or at least you get an email here, the papers have been assigned to you, please review this, and the deadline is 4 weeks away. Most people say, oh yeah, it's 4 weeks away, I'll look at it later. I try to open all the abstracts or all the papers in the first couple of days, do a quick glance through for them. First, look for any violations that exist. This may be violations for blind review. We're not supposed to write their names. They have written their names. It may be by mistake. It may be whatever, intentional, unintentional. From your point of view, you have to consider it's unintentional. Flag that to the track chair and let them decide what the policy is for the conference, whether you should review such a paper or not, or whether it's what we call a desk reject. So it's rejection before review. Again, check for conflict of interest. Not all conflict of interest are captured by affiliation. So please quickly look through it. If you think you know who it is, please tell the track chair, sorry, I can't review this because of COI. If you feel that you really cannot review a paper, right, flag it right away. This is because you may get assigned a paper which you said no to. Flag it right away, preferably within the first 2 days of receiving the assignment. That gives the track chair some flexibility to try and rework the assignments or swap papers between two reviewers. If you say that a day before the reviews are due, it's really difficult for the track chair, and the net result is you don't have enough quality reviews to make the decision. If you pass the first 2 days, then sorry, you didn't meet your timeline for rejecting a paper. Sorry, rejecting reviewing a paper. Put in the hard work, read up on that area, and then review the paper. I also read through all the abstracts and glance them. And this is to make, in my head, a categorization of what kind of paper this is. One, I can't wait to read the paper. Two, oh, do I really need to read this paper? And three, this may be interesting, but I don't know. And the reason I make this categorization is when I'm eventually sitting down and reviewing the papers, I try to avoid reading two papers of the same category in succession. There's a reason to it. Let's say I'm reading two papers, which, gosh, do I really have to read this paper? Then a third paper comes, which is moderate, but because of my last two papers, which I didn't want to review and I had to review, the third paper looks awesome. That's a human bias that exists. So I try to mix up the category of papers as well. Likewise, if you read two papers which you really wanted to read, and then a third paper comes, which is slightly lower in quality than that, or slightly lower in your interest grade for that, you may feel that that paper doesn't meet the mark. Whereas if you are dealt on a different day, it might have been wonderful. So try and realize that as a reviewer, as a human being, we have biases and try to eliminate those biases. Try not to review all the papers in one sitting unless it's unavoidable. Also, when you're trying to review papers, try and mix and match what kind of paper it is. Now, when I actually get down to sitting, reviewing the paper, I do a quick read through of the paper, first for familiarity basis. There may be a bunch of acronyms which I don't understand, etc., etc. It's a quick 5-7 minutes read through. If there are equations, I don't try to understand them. I'm just trying to see what the paper is trying to tell me, going back to what Ayan said, what the main area is, what the context is, what kind of results they have. And then I actually read for the review. This way, when I first hit an acronym, I kind of know what may be coming later, right? Because I've already glanced through it. My mind doesn't get stuck at that point and saying, what does this really mean? And I try to make assumptions, whereas it may be clarified later in the paper. At least that's the process I follow. It helped me in the past. Okay, so with that, I'll spend 5 minutes on the review. So when I'm reading a paper, I try to annotate. So the right-hand side is an example of a paper post-review. This is not in the two-column format that Ayan mentioned, because this particular conference allows for paper in a single column format. I try to underline things that I think are salient, and I try to highlight things which I find are questionable. This is just that when we are having a discussion in the technical program committee later on, it becomes easier for me to recollect what it is rather than trying to read through the paper on the fly just to recollect what it was, especially if I read this paper 3 weeks before. Make notes of key ideas or questions. I don't try to write the review itself while I'm reading the paper. I want to read the paper, let it sink in, and then I try to write the review. So, try to avoid neutral scores. It's very, you don't want to be strongly supportive because you don't fully understand the paper, but you don't want to be too negative either. You want to be kind to the so-called first student. So this favorite score is 3. Try to avoid 3s. Take a stand. Take a 4 or a 2, whichever way it is. That at least gives the track chair an indication of how to rate or prioritize the papers for discussion as well. Also, try not to neutralize your score because of your confidence. Okay, this is not an area that I'm familiar with. So, my confidence level is 1, and hence I'm going to neutralize my score. I'm going to call it 3. No, take a stand there as well. Even if you're not familiar, make it a 2 or a 4 at least. Several conferences take a weighted average. So your score, your rating is weighted by your confidence level to get the eventual metric, or in terms of rating order for discussion. So your confidence will be taken into consideration anyway in this score. So don't neutralize your score just for that. Right. I'll now highlight a couple of reviews from past conferences that I've been part of. If any of the reviewers is here, please, hopefully you take this in the right spirit. This is a a review for an accepted paper at a conference. Okay. You can see the review I'll give a 20 seconds or 10 seconds to look through the review. Right. So the review clearly has 4 sections. The reviewer trying to tell the author, this is what I understood from your paper. What does the paper cover? This is to instill confidence in the author that I understood what your paper was. This is what you're trying to do. This is the main idea. I understand that you get 4.8x energy efficiency, etc., etc. Right? What the reviewer thinks are the main contributions and strengths of the paper. This is for the author as well as for the core reviewers during the discussion as well as for the track chair. Then the weaknesses or the so-called areas of improvement. The paper heavily relies on a previous work. So that essentially means that the novelty is low. That's what the reviewer is trying to say without explicitly saying that it's very low in novelty or does not include novelty. Explicitly saying it's heavily reliant on something else, and we've got to make sure that the assumptions of that paper are valid. Right? Then also shows that you've made all these claims, but you've got to prove certain things which is missing in the paper, especially with respect to particular applications. And again, there's another question on application here. What is this paper really being written for? Right? So the reviewer is explicitly saying, I understand what you're doing, understand your strengths, but 2 challenges that I have. First, novelty is low, and second, I'm not quite sure what application you are going after. And then there's a 4th section which says minor feedback. How can you improve the readability of the paper? Certain figures are not so great, sentences are difficult to read, etc. One of the common mistakes people make is that they reference a figure or a table, and that figure or the table is in the next page or the page after. It's always good to keep the reference or the figure of the table very close to the first point where it's referenced. Otherwise, the reviewers have to keep going back and forth. It's okay, it's annoying, but that can help with the readability of the paper. So just this one is what I would consider a fairly good review in terms of how it's structured. If you hit the next slide, Ayan. This is the same paper as second review. Again, I think the highlight is the same. What is the killer application? Not sure. There's also a comment. You've made the claim that this is based on certain kind of, Hamming distance matrices, but your comparison is not fair because you've used everything else for comparison. So it's highlighting that maybe you want to filter your comparisons to the statement you're making upfront in your introduction and emphasis paper. Right? But otherwise, it's still reasonably well. There's additional comments on improving the paper, etc. If you go to the next slide, there are 2 other reviews for the same paper. Oops, maybe I missed that. Can you go back? I thought there was paper. Okay, fair. Maybe for the next paper, if you keep flipping. This is another, paper 2 has the 4 reviews, sorry. If you go to paper 1, paper 2. Again, a detailed review highlighting what the assumptions are. I don't understand this. I, as a reviewer, am very familiar with reference phi, and I don't see how this applies to this particular problem. Highlighting things that the author may not have mentioned. The calibration cost of this may be very high. The most important part missing is the PSO algorithm details, which is not there, and hence it becomes very difficult to know how this will be implemented in the hardware. Right? So that the next time the author writes this, he or she will know that this is something I absolutely have to include. And these are ways on how to make the paper better, not necessarily for this edition, but for the next edition. I'll flip to the next slide. A second review of the same paper. I would have expected a block diagram of the implementation. It's similar to saying I would have expected details of the implementation to know how it gets applied. There is your novelty claims are questionable statement. Now, this phrase could have been written better. It could have said, I don't get your novelty claims, or this novelty is similar to this work. So it would be good if you can highlight the differences between this reference. Right? This review could definitely have been improved in terms of how it's saying things, but in terms of what it's saying, I think a reviewer would clearly know. I didn't put in the PSO algorithm details, which makes it very difficult for a reviewer to read this, right? And that's the primary problem with this paper. We go to third and fourth review of the same paper, and then I'll stop. Look at the third, the fourth. Now the third reviewer comments that this is using predictive technology models. This may have been an academic paper who may not have access to real industrial models, especially if they are doing some work in cutting edge technology. It is okay to use predictive technology models as long as the assumptions are valid. So that statement really doesn't give the author any useful information, in my particular opinion. It says, yes, you're using this, results would be stronger if you're using real technology data. Great. Doesn't add a lot of value. Information content is low. I would avoid that kind of statement. And review 4. I read this, but the last comment is the only real value add. Could the authors provide a more direct comparison? It doesn't provide anything that the author can actually improve on to make the paper better. So you want to try and mimic review 1 and 2 and not so much review 3 and 4. Okay. With that, I'll pause. I know we have 3 minutes for questions. We'll take it there. Thank you.
Yep. So Shobana, you would like to curate the questions if there is any on the chat window?
Yes, I did provide answer to a few, but still I'll go over. One is that this was mentioned, right, that another point reviewer must consider is the relevance of the paper to the theme of the event. Is this something always applicable?
So usually it is applicable. For instance, if you look at IEEE Connect, there is cyber physical systems. That is the generic theme of the conference. There's also tracks, the circuits and technology track. If you submit an embedded software paper to a circuits and technology track, it doesn't necessarily fit. The reviewers will not be qualified. So in most cases, at least to the track, it has to abide by, and there's a generic theme which it should follow. For example, if you're submitting a paper to the International Symposium on Low Power Electronics and Design, but you don't talk about power at all in the paper, it doesn't quite fit.
Right. Thank you, Rahul. So another question, how do we find pointers to the previous work in the area to determine the novelty factor, etc.?
I can go first.
Yes, sure.
The first job of a reviewer, a potential reviewer, is to be up to speed with what's happening in the domain, right? You can sign up for monthly digests from all the relevant journals, etc., to see what's happening. That's the first thing I would say. Second, look at the references of the paper and look at those papers because they will have other references. That's a good way to know whether this particular author has not compared with 3 other work, which one of its references compared with. That's an easy way. The challenge occurs if all the references are very, very old. Then you can do your own search in IEEE Explore and find it, find a more relevant paper, a more recent paper. Especially if there are particular themes, like let's say there's a paper on AI. Look for MLCAD. That's a conference dedicated to that. You can find recent work there.
Right. Yes. Does that answer your question, Shalini, or you want to go ask anything more?
That is fine, Shobana. Thanks,
Sure.
Rahul.
Sure. Okay. So we have another question. How much time are we expected to spend during background check learning of the topic, or should we inform the chair in such cases?
So I think this is a tough answer because it is up to you how much time you
Yeah.
can spend, right? I think the most important part here is that you need to keep in mind that you are also learning some newer areas, and it is also going to help you in near future for reviewing as well as doing research in that area, right? So it is up to you how much time you can spend. But generally, we have seen, I mean, in my experience, I would say at least I spend a couple of hours together to go through multiple review papers. There are some literature survey good papers which are highlighted and you can do your own search, but at least couple of hours if it's a new domain. If you're already an expert in your domain and you would like to, you may not really want to spend so much time. But if it is a newer domain and you are partially aware of it, then it is better to spend at least couple of hours to go over some good papers and some literature on that.
Yeah, thanks, Ayan. One more question from Jayesh. Can you suggest if the grammar and English is not good in the paper, but the idea and the novelty is good? How does the reviewer handle such a scenario?
So if the if the idea is good, some conferences and you as a reviewer can volunteer that you will shepherd the paper. That means, I mean, whenever a paper is submitted, the reviewers do have a chance to improve or resubmit for final publication, and that's what goes to IEEE Explore. You can say, I'm willing to shepherd, or at least you should provide that comment to the reviewer saying, please fix the grammar or structure of the paper. There are, maybe it's a good suggestion for IEEE CAS. We can provide that service too if people want. There are many folks who are not native English speakers. Right? You've got to understand that there may be some places where it's incorrect. And you can suggest this, look, in this, instead of writing X, you can write Y as a phrase, and that makes it easier to read. So do provide that examples. Suggest that please take a, find a mentor who can review this. And if you are willing to be a shepherd, please let the track know. I'm willing to be a shepherd and I can read the paper before it actually goes for print. And by the way, in some cases, papers are conditionally accepted. So they're accepted only if they meet certain things, which could be improving the readability of the paper as well. And that's just responding to what Niharika posted. It works for some conferences, but again, it may be an overhead to the tractor. So it varies by conference to conference.
Yeah, I think for journals, it is still an option because you get an option to review and rework and get back. But for conference, given the strict timelines, it is generally less likely to really, rework and get back, I think.
But I'll tell you, I've done that. I've done that for multiple papers where I said, okay, sure, the paper is accepted, but I'll be the shepherd. So then you're signing up to do more work.
Okay, any other last question? I think we all need to walk to another other meetings, and also any other last question before we kind of wrap for today?
Yeah, one question I'll just show of, right? How much of weightage is provided to the results section overall in the paper? Are different sections of the paper having different relative weightages? Should we tailor our acceptance based on that?
So maybe I'll start, and Rahul, you can feel free to add there. Result is the most important section, right? I can claim anything that I have given a newer way of doing something or taken a stand, but it should be supported by the data, right? So it's definitely one of the most important part. But it's if you can see that the results are something which are tabulated well but not explained well, those are the places where you can give feedback and all. But if you think that overall the result is not able to support the claims, then definitely it is not it has to be given very high weightage for rejection.
I would also say it depends on conference and papers by itself. There are certain papers where you think the idea is good. Maybe the particular implementation done by the authors is not so great, which results in poor results. For example, they are focusing on, take the example of in-memory computing, they're focusing on the readout circuitry, but their ADC is really not well designed, which is just killing the results. But the idea itself, which is a novel, maybe SRAM self or IMC, is good. You can take that into consideration. It depends on your conference. Also, I don't think there is a mathematical formula which says X times results plus Y times so and so. No, there isn't any.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Shall we take one last question?
I can stay.
Okay, just one last question I think we have, that after reviewing a paper, if I come across its duplicate or idea is presented in some other conference, will it attract any conflict?
I don't fully understand this question on conflict. So I'll give my answer, and if that doesn't satisfy, please. So after, just like they say in wedding, if anybody has an objection, please speak up now, otherwise maintain your silence forever. In some cases, it's like this. Once you've already had the discussion with the other PPC members and you decide to accept a particular paper, sure, it's deemed accepted because acceptance notifications go out. After that, only if it's a straightaway plagiarism, then there may be grounds for rejecting it. Otherwise, you're expected to do the so-called potential check before rather than after. You can still obviously bring this thing up to your track chair, who can then bubble it up to the executive committee of the conference and see if they want to take a particular stand. I don't think there is a uniform rule. But typically, once the decision has been done, because it's a collective decision, it's unlikely that on the basis of one person saying, hey, I found something else here, the paper will be pulled back. I don't know what you meant by conflict, so I'll pause there.
Okay, that addresses all the questions we have on the chat. Anyone wants to ask any more questions? Okay, so I have shared a link of the feedback form. Please do actually fill that form and give us our feedback. That will really help us. Is there something else? I
So
see
Shobhan,
a chat.
I just wanted to
Okay,
share
sure.
that, have a
Yes.
great journey ahead. People who are starting to review for the first time, I mean, it's a great journey. It's not only giving back to the authors to make things better, but also you will learn a lot. And it's a immense, a lot of learning is going to come. And I'm pretty sure as you mature as a reviewer, you will see that your reviews are also improving and things like that. So take it up. It's a very nice thing to help our next levels or people who are peers with us to come on board to make their technical contribution of better quality. So have a great journey ahead as a reviewer.
Echo that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayan and Rahul. This was really a great session, actually. And thanks to everyone who joined. If there are no other questions, we'll conclude the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.